we've been treated so far. Perhaps biggest news of the day: Vishy Anand beating Shak Mamajarov in just 2.5 hours with the black pieces. Huge win for Vishy. His confidence will be sky high. Hopefully, it'll reinvigorate the Vishy of old, and we'll see some more exciting chess.
And while we're on the break, we did have one more result. Maybe we can just pull up that final position.
Absolutely. And Drakin Karyakin, as we expected, was a draw. The last time we saw it was after Rook A C1. There was a check, Bishop E6, and then Andrekin thought it's time to call this one a day. All the chances are gone, and there was quite simply a repetition of checks, and the players called it a day. So no surprises there. A draw, Andrekin Karyakin, and so we've had two results, two games still going on: Svidler Kramnik and Topalov Aronian.
Yeah. Now, for the first 2 days of this candidates webcast, we actually had another event that we were simultaneously broadcasting on our Watch Live Tournaments page here at Chess24, and that was, of course, the European Individual Championship. Right. A lot of people were focused on that up until the candidates got underway. Some pretty big names and just a tremendous amount of grandmasters playing.
Just insanely strong, the tournament.
In Yerevan, as there often is. And yeah, I mean, in a way, it was quite a surprising finish, I think. I mean, of course, not at the very top, let's say. Alexander Motilov was leading.
He was leading for a
long way. And, you know, he's a very experienced player.
Sure.
You know, one of the higher rated in the group, but also has spent quite a lot of time as a second for Sergei Karyakin. And so this, you know, we see this oftentimes where having some work for a top 10 player can actually benefit you in your own chess.
Look at Jon Ludwig Hammer. He's another perfect example. Working closely with Magnus, put 50 points on his rating, is now sitting pretty at 2650, and so on and so forth. So there is a clear correlation between those who do work with the big guys, who then have so much, and they just learn so much more.
Yeah, but one of the more surprising results actually was the fellow who finished in second place on tiebreak, and this was actually the youngest contributor to Chess24, the Spaniard David Anton Guijarro,
yeah.
Pardon me. And yeah, he had a phenomenal tournament, playing way above his rating to finish, I believe, on 8 points.
I think he finished in second position.
Yeah.
He actually got the silver medal. That means he qualifies for the World Cup next year. But it's really the fact that somebody so young. I played him just a couple of months ago in Gibraltar. I lost, should have drawn the game, but the fact that I can now say I lost to the silver medalist of the European Championship makes me feel a lot better. But no, I can tell you, having spoken with David a lot, got to know him recently, he is a fantastically nice kid. I'm going to use the word kid because if he's still 18, I sort of feel like I'm in my rights to do that. But speaking more seriously, his talent really is something else. He is already looking at surpassing the 2600 barrier. Especially after this result, he must be gaining 30 points or something like that. Beat a whole host of 2700 players. He beat Jababa, he beat Kusa, he beat all of these top guys. And he really is being billed as the next hope for Spanish chess. After, of course, well, Vallejo Pons, once upon a time. Again, the guy, Francisco Vallejo Pons, if you don't know, he is heading up a lot of the Spanish content as well. A lot of videos by Paco.
Well, in fact, the fellow who's really heading up the Spanish content is actually an I am David Martinez, who's actually coached David Anton.
Also, yeah.
So, yeah, this was definitely a big result, a lot of celebration going on in our Gibraltar offices and around here at Chess24.
Just such a big result. So he will keep your eyes out. Okay, he's silver medalist of the European Championship, probably knows a thing or two. Have a look at his videos. If you are Spanish speaking and want to learn from him, go to chess24.com and go to the Learn Tan.
Yeah, and I should also mention, we flashed up his biography, and you can find player biographies from not only a lot of the top players in our read section as well, if you look for players. And yeah, a great resource. We'll be updating it, of course, and adding to it with more players as we go along. And that's how we're actually showing all of our little player bios flashing up here on the webcast as well.
Absolutely.
So, meanwhile, back to
the action.
Candidates.
Let's go straight in at the deep end, as I like to do on a cold winter's day. No, I don't like to do that on a cold winter's day.
I don't see you as being more of a
No,
polar bear,
I'm
a Vikings.
I'm a sun kind of guy. I like my sun and beach. Anyway, here in the Aronian game, let's go back to when we last looked at it. We last looked at it after e5, queen, d7, e6. So this neat little idea by Topalov to go bishop d6 a bit earlier, mix things up, but it looks as though Aronian has found enough defensive resources, because after everything came off, Topalov had a decision. Does he take on a5 or does he take on a7? Taking on a5 looked like it could run into trouble, because after bishop b7, queen b4, c5...
Suddenly that bishop becomes a monster.
Suddenly the bishop's a monster, the knight's joining the party, the queen's also getting in on the act, and white basically hasn't got any defenders on the king side. So
Topalov took one look at that and said, no thank you.
Yeah, he took on h7, which also makes a lot of sense, because now he's got ideas of bailing out if he needs to. And after queen d5, this is a good move by Aronian. It covers the e5 square, because back with the queen on e7, you have to be worried about this kind of maneuver, or rook e5 and rook e1, and suddenly white gets a huge position. So queen e5 covers a few important squares, it covers the f5 square, and it covers the h5 square. It's just basically a good centralizing move. And here Topalov played the correct move. f4 looks very, very committal, not being able to block this diagonal anymore, but there is method behind the madness. He wants to play the move f5, which would then threaten queen h8 check, and then this rook would be en prise. But here, after f4, d3 was played. Excellent move again by Aronian, giving, well, perhaps d2 is a threat. The point is that if you take on d3 as well, bishop takes d3, the bishop suddenly re-enters, threatens the queen, and you know, this is no good. So he's not going to take on d3, he's going to play f5. And unfortunately for all of us, that means it's going to end in a repetition. This is all forced play, because after d2, you have to play queen h8. Any other move will basically lose. Any rook move like this, and black queens with check. So you know, check, and this is going to be good for black. So after d2, and if you go passive with the rook, knight f4, and white can resign immediately. There's no way to stop checkmate on g2.
So this is what Topalov is mulling over now after d3. Let's quickly jump back over to our Svidler-Kramnik game.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been really, snail's pace is a good description. We've probably had, what, 3 moves in the past hour or hour and a bit?
Yeah.
It feels like no moves have been made, but queen d2 we last saw by Svidler attacking the d6 pawn. Kramnik defended with knight e8, and now he played the move e4, which I said rook cd1 or e4, wasn't quite sure, and Kramnik played a6.
Now here we had a question from our audience. Instead of a6,
Yeah.
the question was, what happens if black were to play bishop takes c3 here?
Well, bishop takes c3 is the sort of move that for a human is very difficult to play, because you, I don't know which rook, maybe this rook, the knight versus the bishop, clearly the bishop is a superior piece. The knight is passive, the bishop has got clear targets, and you never really like to give up the bishop in these structures unless you force white to take back with the b pawn, and then suddenly you get these double pawns, and then suddenly it makes sense. But when you give up the bishop voluntarily like this, long term, even in an endgame, bishop versus knight, the bishop is normally better with so many pawns on the board. And, you know, if he wants to try and play like this, the knight still hasn't really got a route into the position here. And white is just going to build up again. And it's just suffering. It's just long-term suffering.
Right, so as was pointed out by our listener here, Eric Barber, this is something that engines might recommend, but this is still one area where engines have as a weakness the kind of long-term positional concept. So
absolutely.
If it doesn't see some kind of tactical refutation or anything coming up in the near term that would cause collapse on the dark squares for black, it would consider this. Whereas a human would be much less inclined to play for that exchange, really, just on general principles.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just an almost impossible move for a human to play. So instead, Kramnik played the far more human move, a6, which at least has the idea of playing b5. Now, I don't know how long Peter has spent on this move, but I know, me personally, I would have whipped out a4 within just a couple of minutes of thinking, because I know that this restricts black's play, and it kind of feels completely natural to play a4, so I wonder why he's thinking so much.
Well, remarkably, if you switch over to that live position on the watch page here, you can see that Svidler has been thinking now for 19 minutes.
Incredible. I'm not sure, unless he's looking for a knockout blow, which doesn't feel like there should be in such a position. Well, he's played a move, and
after just over 19 minutes, he's played e5.
It's either a good move or it's a bad move. It's really as simple as that. It might be actually a good move. That said, I think I would have preferred a4 simply because I kind of keep my options open. But maybe he's looked at it, he's analysed it. e5. So what's going on? He's taking advantage of the fact that he's got control down the default. So you can't take this because of rook takes d7, and that's a whole exchange. So the same goes for bishop takes e5, of course. So what to do now with black? Well, the other problem that you've got is this knight's coming into e4, and if you come behind, maybe I just come behind here like this, and my knight is hopping into e4. So maybe Peter has analysed it to the extent that actually, this offers very good chances.
It's just a good move here, a good strong move.
It could be a strong move, and it's not pleasant to play against.
No, absolutely not.
This knight is just so passive.
Right.
And with the tripling down the d file, you can never get rid of the tension. You can try b5 here.
Every day is another beginning. Gonna make my move, gonna live my dream. Gonna make my move, gonna live my dream. Gonna make my move, gonna live my dream.